I used to think keeping my head down meant peace. Turns out, silence just teaches people how to hurt you without consequences. My name's Marla Jensen. I'm 34, a freelance animator, and the single mom of a 10-year-old who is hands down the bravest person I know. Her name is Lana, and this story? It starts at my younger brother's glamorous engagement party beneath string lights, fake smiles, and the kind of tension you only feel when people pretend they're better than you. It ends with the truth. Raw, loud, and finally undeniable. The invitation came in a white gold envelope, heavy cardstock cursive font, the kind that tries too hard to say we're upper class now. The return address? My parents' house where I hadn't been welcome in years. Inside it read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Liam Jensen and Camille Rowe. Formal attire required. Rooftop venue. RSVP mandatory." That was it. No hope to see you. No love, Mom and Dad. Just proof that I still existed, but barely. When I showed the invite to Lana, she twirled in her socks like she'd just won a golden ticket. "Do you think Uncle Liam will like my daisy dress?" she asked, hugging the one she wore at her last piano recital. I smiled because I couldn't ruin it for her. "He'll love it." I lied. I wish I'd told her no. I wish I'd protected her from what came next. The venue was a glass-wrapped rooftop above downtown San Diego. Music floated through the air, and the smell of white roses mixed with ocean wind. Everyone wore designer smiles and champagne-colored suits. Lana held my hand like a lifeline. The moment we walked in, the energy shifted. I know what that sounds like, dramatic, but you could feel at the stairs the sudden hush. It was like the music skipped a beat just because we had the nerve to show up. My mother Judith was the first to approach. Hair pulled so tight it looked painful, dress perfectly pressed, lips barely moving when she hissed, "You shouldn't have come." Then she looked at Lana, not like a grandmother, more like she was inspecting a stray dog someone dragged in. "This isn't a children's party," she whispered. "Try not to cause a scene." Lana nodded, instantly shrinking into herself. And that's when I should have turned around and walked out. But I didn't. 5 minutes later, it happened. Lana was holding a glass of cranberry punch, probably trying to blend in just like I taught her. She smiled nervously at Camille, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, who stood in a circle of people laughing about destination wedding venues and flower walls. And then someone bumped Lana. Just a little. Just enough. The punch slipped. The glass tilted. And a deep red splash arched through the air like a curse in slow motion, landing smack in the middle of Camille's ivory gown. Gasps, silence, stares. Lana froze. Her lips trembled. She whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Camille didn't let her finish. "You disgusting little brat," she snapped, stepping forward with heels clicking like a warning. Then she did it. She slapped my daughter. Hard. The sound was sharp, cruel, like it was meant to punish. Lana crumpled to the floor, both hands to her cheek, tears already spilling down. And I lost it. I ran to her, dropped to my knees, and held her close. Her small body shook in my arms like a bird trapped in a storm. "What is wrong with you?" I screamed at Camille. But before she could say a word, my mother stepped in like Camille was the real victim. "You've ruined everything," Judith said. "You and your little mistake." Then my father Paul appeared like a ghost with dead eyes. "You need to leave," he said flatly. I couldn't speak. I was shaking, trembling with rage, but too stunned to argue. I picked up Lana, who clung to me like her bones had vanished, and walked toward the exit. That's when I saw it. Phones up, people recording. One of them, an old friend, Tina, from college. Her face looked horrified. She didn't stop it, but she didn't look away either. She filmed everything. That night I sat on our couch in the dark. Lana's cheek still showed Camille's handprint. She'd cried herself to sleep. I dabbed her face with a wet cloth, but the guilt in me stung worse than any bruise. I let them near her. I brought her into that viper's nest and watched them attack like it was natural. My phone buzzed. A message. "Tina, I filmed what happened. I have the whole thing. Do you want it?" I stared at the screen. My hands shook. Then I typed back one word. Yes. The video hit like a punch to the soul. The music, the glances, Judith's whisper, the splash, the slap, Lana's sobs, my parents' silence, the coldness in every face. They all saw it, and no one helped. I watched it twice, then a third time. Something inside me, something I didn't know I still had, woke up. Fury, maybe, but mostly clarity. I walked over to Lana, who was curled on the couch, holding her favorite stuffed seal. She looked up at me with wide eyes. "Was it my fault?" she asked. No, I said, brushing her hair back. None of it was your fault. She paused, then sat up, grabbed my phone, and pressed record. My name is Lana, she said softly. I'm 10. Yesterday I went to a party and spilled juice. My aunt hit me. She stopped the recording. People should know, she whispered. She was right. And suddenly I knew what had to be done. The next morning sunlight poured in like nothing had happened. Birds chirped, a neighbor's dog barked. And yet inside our apartment everything felt cracked. Lana was still asleep. Her little hand curled around her stuffed seal like it was the only safe thing in the world. I opened my laptop. Search child assault lawyer near me. I'd never even considered hiring one before. But I wasn't just a mother now, I was her only line of defense. That slap wasn't just a moment of cruelty. It was the climax of years of rejection dressed up as family tradition. By noon, I had an appointment with Carla Reyes, a child advocacy attorney recommended by Tina. She worked specifically with family abuse cases. Reyes met us at her office, calm, confident, no nonsense. She reminded me of the women I used to wish were my aunts, the ones who spoke plainly, listened hard, and didn't blink when the truth got ugly. You have the video, she asked. I handed her my phone. She watched it silently, her jaw tightening as the slap echoed through the room again. Then she looked up and nodded once. We're pressing charges against Camille Rowe for physical assault of a minor, she said. And we'll be adding negligence and emotional endangerment against your parents. No hesitation. No let me get back to you, just action. I blinked, stunned. Can I actually do this? Reyes leaned in slightly. You can, and you should, because if this happened to your daughter, it's happened to someone else's too. That evening, I sat with Lana on our worn couch. The video file was still open on my laptop, paused at the moment right before everything went wrong. I explained what we were doing. This isn't just about punishing them, I said. It's about protecting you and making sure they can't do this to anyone else. Lana stared at the screen, then at me. Her eyes, those wide, honest eyes, held something I hadn't seen before. I don't want them to be mean to other kids, she whispered. You're not just brave, I told her. You're good. The next morning, we filed for an emergency protective order. Within 24 hours, a judge approved it. Camille, Judith, and Paul were legally barred from contacting or approaching Lana. They had no idea I'd gone from scared to ready. I called Tina. Post the video, I told her. Are you sure, she asked? This will blow up. I don't care, I replied. They made it public. Now they'll answer publicly. She uploaded it that evening, unedited raw. Lana's voice came first, soft, steady. My name is Lana. I'm 10. My aunt hit me because I spilled juice. Then came the slap, the silence, the dismissal. By morning, it had over 300,000 views. By lunch, we were viral. Protect. Lana started trending. Parenting blogs shared it. TikTok duets flooded in moms, therapists, school counselors, each of them holding up signs saying, "We see you." Celebrities weighed in. A well-known actress reposted it with the caption, "There's no excuse. Not for this. Not ever." Camille tried to fight back, of course. 2 days later, she posted a video of her own heavily edited soft lighting mascara just barely smudged. She spoke in a voice coated with performative remorse. I want to apologize if things looked bad, she said. There were a lot of emotions that day. It was chaotic. I love my niece. She never said Lana's name, never said she hit her, just alluded to chaos, like we'd wandered in with drama instead of dignity. Then she implied I told Lana to cause trouble for attention. I nearly crushed my coffee cup watching it. Lana was sitting beside me quietly, coloring a fox in a tutu. She didn't look up when she said, "She's lying, isn't she?" "She is," I said, and now the world knows it. Her comment section. A war zone. You hit a child. On camera. Stop acting like a victim. That girl deserves protection, not gaslighting. Nice try. You're done. Brands dropped Camille within hours. Her skincare collab got pulled. Wedding sponsors vanished. Her PR rep released a generic statement about pausing all campaigns indefinitely. I didn't dance over it, but I won't lie, I breathed easier. For once, it wasn't me taking the hits. 3 nights later, someone knocked. I looked through the peephole and froze. Noah, Camille's fiancé. Well, maybe ex-fiancé now. He stood in jeans and a wrinkled button-up, eyes hollow, like he hadn't slept since the party. I cracked the door open, said nothing. I saw the video, he said. All of it. I didn't believe it at first, I didn't want to. But it's all true, isn't it? I stepped aside. Lana peeked up from the couch. She stiffened when she saw him. He crouched down to her level. I'm sorry for what happened to you, he said gently. It wasn't your fault. You were just being a kid and you were very brave. Lana gave a small nod, then went back to coloring. Noah stood up and looked at me. I ended it with Camille. I couldn't stay with someone who'd hurt a child and lie about it. He pulled out his phone. There's something else. He showed me emails between Camille and her manager. There were negotiations, sponsorships tied to the wedding footage. One contract worth $500,000, all hidden from him. Worse, she had a private clause after the wedding. Content went viral she planned to transition out of the relationship. I was a brand, he said, not a fiancé. He looked like someone who just found out their whole life was a costume. And I knew that feeling too well. She never loved me, he added quietly. But I think you and Lana deserve better than what happened. He didn't stay long. He left after thanking me for the clarity I never asked to deliver. A few days later, I got an email from Judith. Subject line, enough is enough. No apology, no acknowledgement of the slap. Just, a private family meeting has been arranged. Attendance is expected. Expected. That was rich. I forwarded it to Reyes. Her reply came in less than a minute. If you go, don't go alone. I didn't tell Lana about the meeting. Some truths are too heavy for a 10-year-old to carry, and she had already borne more than her share. I asked our neighbor Mrs. Ellis to watch her for a few hours. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a granola bar and told me, come back standing tall. The family meeting was set at a private mediation office in Beverly Hills. It was sterile, neutral walls, soundproof glass, the kind of place where people with too much to lose pretend to solve things quietly. I walked in wearing a navy blazer I hadn't touched in years. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I needed me to remember who I was. Not the failure they whispered about, not the charity case they tolerated, but the woman who survived them. Judith was already seated. Sunglasses indoors like grief had suddenly become a fashion statement. Paul sat beside her, stiff as concrete. And Camille? She was absent. I didn't ask why. Didn't care either. A mediator introduced herself, soft voice, neutral face. We're here to create space for understanding. I almost laughed. Judith spoke first. You've embarrassed this family enough, she said, folding her hands like a disappointed nun. This online circus needs to end. I said nothing. Paul cleared his throat. We understand emotions ran high, but this public shaming, it's excessive. I leaned back in my chair, calm. My daughter was assaulted. Judith's mouth tightened. It was a mistake. Children spill things. Tempers flare. You turned one slap into a public trial. One slap, I repeated slowly. That's what you're calling it. Paul sighed like I was the one exhausting him. We thought we raised you better than this, Marla. And there it was, the old script. Me, the ungrateful one. Them, the long-suffering martyrs. But I'd memorized their lines too long. It was time for mine. No, I said, voice steady. You raised me to shrink. Judith's jaw twitched. You taught me to apologize for other people's cruelty. I continued. You raised me to believe I was lucky to be tolerated. You watched your granddaughter get slapped, and your first instinct was to protect the woman who did it. The room went still. I didn't ruin this family's name, I added. I just refused to lie for it anymore. Before either of them could respond, the door opened, and in walked Noah. The air shifted. Paul stood up. This is a private. I was invited. Noah interrupted, voice low but firm. I sent copies of the brand contracts Camille was hiding. I thought you should see how she planned to profit off a child's humiliation. He placed a thick folder on the table. And just for clarity, he added, turning to the mediator, I'm here to support Marla. Because I watched this family protect an abuser while condemning a child. That needs to be said on the record. Judith looked like someone had slapped her this time. The mediator cleared her throat. This meeting may need to pause for legal review. No need, I said, standing up. I'm done here. Paul stood too. So that's it. You won't even try to work through this. I tried for 34 years, I replied. You just didn't notice because I did it quietly. Judith finally took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but not from remorse. From exposure, from loss of control. You always wanted this, didn't you, she snapped, to ruin Camille, to paint yourself as the victim. You were jealous of her. You were always jealous. I stepped to the door. And then, without turning around, I said, I never wanted to ruin anyone. I just wanted to be loved like I mattered. But since that was too much to ask now, I just want distance. And I walked out. Lana was waiting in the next room, eating a bag of pretzels and sketching a raccoon in a ballerina skirt. She looked up curious. How'd it go? I smiled and knelt beside her. I said everything I needed to. She studied my face. Are they still mad? I paused. Maybe, but that's not my weight to carry anymore. She nodded slowly, then held up her drawing. Do you think raccoons like ballet? I think they'd be brilliant at it, I said. And I meant it. The fallout didn't take long. By the following week, the video had crossed 1 million views. National parenting forums had picked it up. A journalist from a major digital outlet emailed me for comment. I declined. We weren't chasing headlines, we were reclaiming peace. Camille's silence turned into absence. Her social media pages went private. Her name quietly vanished from brand websites. Last I heard, she'd retreated to a wellness retreat in Colorado to rebalance her image. As for Judith and Paul, a single letter arrived in the mail. Typed, no signature. We regret how things unfolded. We hope in time you will consider reconciliation. I burned it. Not out of rage, out of closure. Lana started sleeping through the night again. No nightmares, no flinching when someone raised their voice. One Saturday morning, I found her in the kitchen pouring cereal like it was the most normal thing in the world. She looked up and said, "Can we plant flowers on the balcony today?" We'd never done that before, never even talked about it. But something about that moment felt sacred. Yes, I said, let's make it beautiful. 2 weeks after the family meeting, it got quiet. Not fake quiet. The kind that pretends nothing happened, but the kind where you can finally hear yourself think. Lana slept better. I stopped checking the door twice at night. The tension that once clung to the corners of our home slowly peeled away. One morning, we opened the balcony door and breathed in the breeze like it was the first time we'd ever noticed it. We planted daisies in cracked ceramic pots. Lana gave each one a name. Hers was Juno, mine Freya. I used to think healing would be loud, some grand declaration or tearful moment of freedom. But no, it was Lana humming to herself as she watered the plants. It was making pancakes without watching my phone for threats. It was stillness, honest, boring stillness, and I cherished it. Around that time, I received an email from a publishing startup I had once applied to years ago. A quiet little team based out of Seattle focused on children's media and storytelling kits. Back then, I'd submitted a portfolio of digital illustrations and forgotten about it because Judith had told me real jobs don't come from coloring pages. But now, subject line. We love your work, want to build something together. I reread it 3 times before daring to believe it was real. They had seen Lana's sketches, yes, hers. She'd drawn a cartoon fox in a tutu, and I posted it to our new shared Instagram account Z+M Studio, just for fun. Apparently, it had reached the right inbox. Would you be open to illustrating a storybook kit, the editor wrote. We think your style is warm, quirky, and inclusive, exactly what children need right now. I didn't hesitate. I wrote back, yes, let's do it. That same afternoon, I picked Lana up from her art club. She skipped toward the car holding a popsicle stick sculpture and talking about clouds that looked like turtles. On the drive home, I told her. She blinked, then squealed, "Wait me, they saw my fox?" "They did," I said. "And they want to make something with both of us." Lana threw her arms around my neck the moment we got inside. "Does this mean we have a job together?" I smiled. "It means people see you, people who matter." And maybe that was the real victory. The days that followed were sweet in a way I hadn't tasted in years. We worked on sketches at the kitchen table. I taught Lana how to clean up digital lines, how to scan her paper drawings. She taught me how to slow down. We brainstormed character names, argued playfully over bow tie colors, even stayed up late one Friday turning a raccoon she drew into a space explorer. The publisher loved it. They added a launch date. We signed a small but meaningful contract. Z+M Studio wasn't just an idea anymore, it was real. Then one evening the doorbell rang. It was Tina. She hadn't stopped by since the video went viral, but we'd stayed in touch. She held a manila envelope in her hands and looked off. Not nervous exactly, just heavier. "I need to show you something," she said. We sat down at the table. Lana was still in the bath singing something about spaghetti monsters. Tina opened the envelope and slid a few printed screenshots toward me. "Camille's trying to flip the narrative," she said, privately, through a third party. I scanned the pages. It was a Reddit post. Anonymous but easy to trace. The phrasing, the timing, the small references, they screamed Camille. The post claimed I was an unstable mother, that Lana was coached, and that the slap wasn't violent, just exaggerated by a bitter ex-family member chasing attention. There were even claims that I was leveraging the situation for internet fame and profit. I stared at the words, my chest suddenly tight. "She's planting seeds," Tina said, "trying to rewrite history. It's not viral this time, it's targeted. Quiet, strategic. The kind of attack you don't see coming until it's shaped how people think. I exhaled slowly. Not out of fear, not out of anger. Just resolve. She can scream into the wind if she wants, I said. I'm done reacting. Tina hesitated. Are you sure you could press additional charges? Digital defamation stalking tactics. I'm not giving her any more of our time, I said. Let her post. Let her rot in her little echo chamber. I meant it. But later that night, after Lana was asleep, I sat in the dark with those printed posts and felt a familiar ache bloom in my ribs. It wasn't about reputation. It was about the quiet cruelty, the denial of our reality. The way people like Camille don't punch, they erase. I folded the papers, placed them in a drawer I didn't plan to open again, and went to bed. The next morning, Lana drew a squirrel flying a hot air balloon. She named him Professor Cheeks. I opened our emails and found messages from parents, teachers, and even a therapist in Montana. Each one said the same thing in different words. Your story made us brave, and I realized something. Camille's version would never matter again. Because we weren't just a story. We were a movement. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the skyline, Lana asked if we could walk down to the library. We used to do that before all the chaos, before bruises and bodyguards and courtroom whispers. I said yes. We walked in silence at first, then she spoke. Do you think people can change? I looked at her, surprised by the weight of her question. Some can, I said, but some people don't want to. She nodded slowly like she was filing that away. Then, what if someone says sorry but they don't show sorry? I stopped walking, knelt beside her. Then you don't have to let them close again. Her face softened. Okay. That night, she slipped a new drawing under my door. It was a fox standing on a little hill holding a flag that said "Still Here." 3 stars twinkled above her head. I tucked the drawing into my sketchbook, not just to keep it safe, but because it was true. We were still here, and we weren't done yet. Momentum was a strange thing. Quiet at first, then suddenly, it was everywhere. After we launched our first story kit through the publisher, orders began trickling in. Then they poured. A blogger from Oregon posted a glowing review. A homeschool co-op shared pictures of kids coloring Lana's raccoon in astronaut boots. Our little shop Z+M studio was no longer a hobby. It was a heartbeat. Lana called it our world. She said it like she was claiming land no one else could touch. I understood that deeply. This space, these drawings, this piece, we'd built it on the ruins they left behind. And we were proud of every crooked line. Then one afternoon, I got a call from the director of a children's art foundation. Lana's teacher had quietly nominated her. She has something rare, the woman said. We'd love to invite her to a youth art residency this summer. Just 6 kids in the whole state get in. My breath caught. She read me the details: nature walks, storytelling workshops, mentorship from professional illustrators. And best of all, Lana would be allowed to bring one guardian and help design the theme for the final exhibition. It was everything I'd once dreamed of as a child but never had a chance to experience. They asked if I'd consider attending as her creative partner. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. We'd be honored. Lana was sitting on the floor surrounded by markers and cereal dust when I told her. She stared at me, mouth open, like I'd just handed her the moon. They picked me. They did. Her eyes shimmered. Can we draw a whole world together? Absolutely. She grabbed her sketchbook, already drawing trees with candy-colored trunks and birds wearing top hats. But good news travels fast, especially through cracks in family silence. It started with an envelope. Plain, no return address. But the handwriting, I knew it too well. Judith's cursive, perfect and precise, like nothing had ever been messy in her life. Inside was a letter. Marla. I heard about Lana's acceptance. Congratulations. This is a beautiful opportunity. I would love to attend the final exhibition. I regret how things happened. Let's start fresh. There was no apology, just suggestion. Let's start fresh, as if we were muffins, as if the past hadn't happened. I held the paper for a long time. Not angry, not sad. Just tired. That night, I told Lana about the letter. She looked up from her fox in a tea party sketch and asked, "Why does Grandma want to come now?" I thought about it. All the years she looked through me. The way she spoke of Lana like an accessory. The slap she excused. The meeting where love had been a foreign language on her tongue. She says she wants to start over, I said carefully. Lana was quiet for a moment. Then, you think she means it? I think she misses control. Lana nodded slowly. I don't want her to come. And that was that. I wrote a letter back, short, honest. Judith, thank you for your note. Lana deserves a future that isn't tethered to past pain. We're building something different now. You're not part of it. Please respect our boundary. I didn't send it right away, but I read it aloud to myself, and it felt true. The kind of truth you don't yell. Just breathe. In the weeks leading up to the art residency, Lana and I created storyboards on our kitchen wall. Characters bloomed like spring. She named her world Brave Hollow and filled it with forest animals who spoke in riddles and always chose kindness even when it wasn't returned. She asked me once, "Do you think forgiveness means we have to go back?" I answered honestly, no. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go without holding hands again. She seemed to understand more than most adults would. Then the night before we left for the residency, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. It was Noah. We hadn't spoken since the family meeting. Not a word. His message was short. "Need to talk, not drama, just something I think you deserve to know." I debated. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the way he phrased it felt different, honest. Less about guilt, more about responsibility. So I replied, "Tomorrow morning, before we leave. Quick." He arrived at 8:30, coffee in hand, dark circles under his eyes. "I won't stay long," he said. "But you should know Camille filed for bankruptcy." I blinked. "What?" She burned through her savings, lost the deals. Tried to sue a former sponsor for breach of contract, but they countered with footage and clauses. "It's over." I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel joy. Just finality. She asked if I'd reach out, he added. Said maybe if you heard how bad it's gotten, you'd soften. I looked him in the eyes. "That's not how this works. It was never about revenge." Noah nodded. "I figured. Just thought you deserved the full picture." He paused before leaving. "You did the right thing, even if it ripped everything open." I walked him out without another word. Because closure doesn't always need a conversation. At the residency, Lana shined. She wore mismatched socks and carried her fox-stickered notebook like it was sacred. She spoke up in group discussions, laughed without checking if she was too loud, drew confidently in front of adults with degrees and titles. And when it came time for the final exhibition, she chose to hang one of her earliest drawings. The fox, standing on a hill. Flag and paw still here. She didn't add anything. Didn't need to. The message was loud enough. After the show, a woman approached me. Soft scarf, kind eyes. "Your daughter's work," she said. It made me cry. Not because it was sad, but because it felt like she'd survived something and made art out of the pieces. I swallowed hard. "She has," I said, "and we're still building." Coming home after the residency felt like stepping into a softer version of ourselves. The apartment hadn't changed. Same crooked bookshelf. Same creaky drawer that always stuck halfway open. But something in the air felt lighter, like the walls had learned how to exhale. Lana unpacked first. She laid out her sketchbooks like trophies, stacked her new brushes like treasure. Then she taped a postcard above her bed. It showed the final exhibition hall, her fox illustration in the center. At the bottom, she'd scribbled in crayon, "We told the story. Now we get to live it." I stood in the doorway for a long time just reading those words. She didn't ask for applause. She just claimed the piece she earned. I reopened our shop emails the next day. Dozens of new requests had come in: schools asking for art kits, parents requesting personalized prints, a nonprofit hoping to collaborate on a children's grief workbook. One message, though, made me pause. Subject: from Paul, my father. I hadn't heard from him since the family meeting. Not a word. No letters, no voicemails. I hovered over the email like it might explode. Then I opened it. "Marla, I'm not writing to fix anything. I know I can't." I watched from a distance because I wasn't brave enough to do anything else. Watching you stand up in that meeting, watching the world stand beside your daughter, it forced me to sit with myself in a way I never had. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't expect to be part of your life, but you need to know I see it now. I should have stopped Judith. I should have protected my granddaughter. I should have been better. I won't bother you again. Just thank you for raising her into someone the world needed to meet. Paul. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just closed my laptop, walked into the living room, and sat quietly beside Lana, who was building a spaceship out of paper towel rolls. She looked at me, eyes bright. "What's up?" I shook my head gently. "Just remembering who I used to be." She tilted her head, curious. "Do you miss her?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said, "but I'm proud of her. She got us here." The next week, I boxed up old photos. Not out of hate, just to make room for new ones. I found a dusty family album tucked behind old tax folders. The kind Judith had made every year, perfect pages, color-coded tabs. Camille was in almost every shot. Me, sometimes a shoulder, a shoe, a shadow mostly. I flipped through it quietly. Lana wandered over and peeked over my arm. "Why aren't you in a lot of these?" she asked. "They didn't always see me," I said softly. Lana studied one page. A holiday photo. Camille holding the turkey, Judith smiling at the camera, Paul off to the side with a drink, me barely visible behind a wreath. Lana reached into her art drawer, pulled out a gold marker and circled the part of the photo where I stood half hidden. Then she wrote in tiny letters, "She was always there." I kept that page. Not to hold on to pain, but to remember the girl who stayed standing even when no one clapped. That weekend, we visited a quiet lake just outside the city. Lana brought her sketchbook. I brought sandwiches and silence. We sat on a blanket beneath a tree, sunlight spilling across the water like spilled milk. Birds chirped, leaves rustled. It was nothing big, nothing cinematic, but it felt like ceremony. She handed me a new drawing. It was the fox again. This time, she wasn't holding a flag. She was lying in a hammock between two trees, a little squirrel curled beside her. Above them, in simple letters, "We're safe now." I looked at Lana. "Yeah," I whispered. "We are." That night, we made popcorn and watched an old animated film. The kind with hand-drawn backgrounds and slightly scratchy music. Lana fell asleep halfway through, head in my lap, mouth slightly open. I didn't move. I just watched her sleep. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something might be taken from us at any moment. No email, no knock, no explosion waiting around the corner. Just peace. The kind you fight for. The kind you don't owe anyone else. One last letter came 2 weeks later. This time from the court. A formal conclusion of the case. Protective orders remained in place. Custody visitation, none of it disputed anymore. They didn't even try to fight. Reyes texted me simply, "You did this. You kept her safe." I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it. Not for storage, but for release. That Sunday, Lana and I painted the front door of our apartment. She picked the color turmeric yellow. Bright, odd, impossible to ignore. Neighbors walked by and smiled. Some waved. Mrs. Ellis across the hall said, "Sunshine suits you too." And for once, I believed it. Later that evening, Lana asked if we could write a letter together. One not to send, just to write. To who, I asked. She thought for a second. To the me who got slapped. I blinked, then nodded. So we sat together on the kitchen floor and she whispered as I wrote, "Jaime, you didn't do anything wrong. You were brave even when no one helped. You're not too much. You're not in the way. You're not wrong for being you." I still cry sometimes, but now I know it's okay. One day, you're going to have a world where you're not afraid. Just wait, it gets better. I love you. Love. Me. We folded the paper and tucked it behind the bookshelf. "I'll find it again one day," she said. "You will," I told her. "And when you do, you'll smile." People ask sometimes if I ever forgave my family. And the truth is, I don't carry that question anymore. Because I stopped asking why they didn't love me the way I needed. I started loving myself in the way I never had. And I gave that to Lana. In our morning rituals, in our silly drawings, in every no we said to people who didn't earn a yes. That's what freedom looked like. Not erasing the past, but refusing to let it shape the future. We still hang the fox drawings. We still use mismatched mugs. We still live in the same apartment with the crooked bookshelf and sticky drawer. But everything's different. Because now when Lana looks around, she sees a life we chose, not one we begged to be part of. And when she laughs, it fills every room, every corner, even the ones that used to hold silence. Story 2. My sister beat my 12-year-old at her wedding, so I crashed her party in front of 200 guests. During the glitzy wedding of my sister. The evening was supposed to be ideal. Golden chandeliers reverberate with fairy lights, designer dresses, gentle music, and laughing. However, my sister did the unimaginable in front of everyone in the midst of all that splendor. In front of hundreds of visitors, she grabbed my 12-year-old daughter by the hair and struck her in the face. Nobody made a move. She was not stopped, however I did. The wedding wasn't only stopped by what I did next. Her entire world was devastated, and how I exacted my retribution. For the rest of her life, she will remember it. Hello, I'm 35 years old, and my name is Victoria. I doubt you would recognize me as the lady I once was. Hopeful, soft-spoken, never failing to see the best in others even when they may not deserve it. I thought that love would ultimately return if you offered it. However, that was prior to life completely destroying me, prior to losing everything. That was 4 years ago. Andrew was the man I was married to. He was not wealthy. He didn't possess pricey timepieces or dress in suits. But my goodness, he had a musical heart. He taught music in high school. At the age of 8, our daughter Nora would spin around barefoot in the grass like she was dancing for the stars every evening, while he sat on the porch strumming his guitar. Our home was hardly a mansion. We lived in a 2-bedroom house with mismatched dishes, creaking stairs, and more love than most people ever experience. And I genuinely believed it to be sufficient at the time. Some evenings, I can still hear Andrew's voice, warm, steady, and low. The voice that soothed your heartbeat even when everything else seemed to be crumbling. However, our planet did ultimately collapse, painfully quietly, like a gentle tone that fades into quiet. He had been feeling worn out. We initially believed it to be stress. He volunteered for a local youth band, taught full-time, and stayed up late to help Nora with her Saturn school project. Then the bruises appeared, the nocturnal sweats, and the weight loss. I pleaded with him to visit a physician, the pancreatic cancer diagnostic stage. As if statistics could prepare you to see the love of your life go away, I recall sitting in that white hospital room and holding his hand while the doctor gave the treatment statistics for timeline. We made every effort. Chemo, natural remedies, whispered prayers in the dark. However, the amount of love you have for someone is irrelevant to cancer. It simply takes. And he was taken. My hand was still around his when Dad passed away on a soggy Tuesday morning with Nora's artwork attached to the wall next to his bed. His age was 38. All of a sudden, I was a widow. Nora, too. As a young child, she was clueless as to why her father would never return home. That was the day. Everything was different. I had no idea that the worst was still to come. I still recall standing in our peaceful kitchen after the burial, looking at Andrew's favorite coffee cup, which was still next to the sink. The globe continued to move. People left casseroles, gave flowers, and spoke those prepared phrases as if he were in a better place. Or at least his suffering was brief. However, nobody discusses the experience of reaching for an absent hand while in bed. I had to continue. There was nothing I could do. I was necessary to Nora. At the time, she was just 8 years old. She was also perplexed as to why her father's guitar remained silent, or why the door had not touched his slippers. Is he on a trip, she would ask her mother? And I would lie politely and quietly, until she stopped asking one day. Like dust, the truth crept into our walls. I went back to work at the clinic downtown, recording patient details and testing blood samples, putting on a smile that was more armor than feeling. We departed from our previous residence. Too many memories, too many hollow echoes. I relocated to a tiny 2-bedroom apartment with a window that shook in the rain and paper-thin walls. We had it even if it wasn't much. Together, Nora and I transformed that tiny flat into a peaceful haven. I put glow-in-the-dark stars above her bed and she helped me to paint the living room mint green. We would sit together every night, sometimes reading, sometimes just supporting one another through the difficulties and sometimes in quiet. However, Andrew's family constructed barriers as I attempted to reconstruct. Eleanor, his mother, who was previously a judge and was feared in every courtroom, had always regarded me as if I were a disgrace to her son, as if I had pulled him from the life he was due. She never stated it directly. She didn't have to. Her eyes spoke for themselves. And Andrew's younger sister, Kimberly, perfect, rich, and always prepared for the camera, acted as though we didn't exist. There wasn't a single post or call for the niece her brother left behind on her Instagram, which was full of brunches, high-end bags, ski vacations, and Aspen. I used to tell Nora that various individuals had different methods of loving, but I was secretly beginning to see that some people don't love at all. And I started to develop a new kind of strength in that quiet, that abandonment. It's the type that comes from survival, not boisterous or arrogant. What was intended to shatter you? However, I had no clue that stillness would suddenly burst in front of 100 people and cause everything to fall apart. I saw it when I opened our mailbox on a Thursday night, a large ivory envelope with flawless handwriting and a gold accent. I briefly believed it was an error. I shook my hands and flipped it over. Brandon Ellis Monroe, Eleanor Grayson and Kimberly extend a warm invitation to you. I almost burst out laughing, not with delight but with incredulity. I was abruptly asked to Kimberly's wedding after years of quiet and being treated like a shadow. I was fully aware that this was an invitation to a show. Love wasn't at issue. It has nothing to do with family. The topic was optics. Seats are being filled, attempting to be inclusive, maintaining appearances. I put the mail on the kitchen table, intending to ignore it until Nora saw it. Her eyes brightened as she entered and spotted the mail. In addition, Kimberly is getting hitched. Holding the invitation as if it were a jewel, she inquired. I paused. Yes, dear. Yes, she is. Her voice became quiet and beseeching. Please, let's go, Mama. It's the family of Daddy. All I want is to see them once again. I was broken by that moment. Nora still had hope, you see. I hoped that perhaps someone from her father's side was still interested. I hope that family has more significance than blood. I wanted to keep her safe, to protect her from more letdowns. However, how can you destroy a 12-year-old's hope without also shattering a part of her soul? I said yes. My coworker lent me a dress in navy blue. Easy, tidy, nothing ostentatious. I hanged it over the closet door like it was silk after ironing it twice. I curled Nora's long brown hair and wrapped it with a delicate white ribbon the evening before the wedding. She appeared to be a little star, a glimmer of hope, entering a world that had done all in its power to smother her brilliance. Perhaps Grandma Eleanor will give me a hug today, Nora said to me in a whisper as we were getting dressed the morning of the wedding. I grinned, but my chest ached as I knew in my heart that today wouldn't be about love. There would be a test. Furthermore, those who failed it would never anticipate it. The Skyview estate has a fairy tale-like appearance. A fountain big enough to accommodate koi fish tall marble columns, and visitors arriving in black town cars like kings and queens. However, I didn't feel like a king or queen. I had the impression that I had just entered a world that had already determined I didn't belong there. As we got closer to the check table, Nora gripped my hand more tightly. A woman grinned at us while wearing a black velvet outfit and a sleek headset. It wasn't a genuine smile, though. It was practiced. A distant, polite name. She hardly looked up as she asked, Victoria, Dawson. I cleared my throat as I spoke. And Nora, my daughter. After looking over the list, she took 2 place cards out of a tray and gave them to us in a well-practiced manner. Take pleasure in the festivities. But my stomach fell as I looked down. 2 technicians and 1 widowed technician card. Youngster. Just labels as if we were social charity cases with no names or titles. Beside me, I sensed Nora freezing. She was 12, but not unintelligent. As she read the card, her face gradually twisted in bewilderment. Why does it say this? Softly, she inquired. I felt like screaming. I felt like tearing those cards in 2, grabbing her hand and heading straight back to our tiny car to go forever. However, I didn't. I feigned a smile instead. I said, just a mistake, honey, without intending to. Come, let's locate our table. But my heart, I was certain that wasn't an error. There was a message. Icy, acerbic, deliberate. A reminder of how Kimberly and Eleanor perceived us as unexpected visitors in a narrative they attempted to hide. Crystal-dripping chandeliers glistened throughout the ballroom. Servers moving around the floor with champagne flutes and gold trim or a live string quartet playing quietly in the corner. However, our table is nestled close to the kitchen doors. We could hardly see the stage from that far back. We were not greeted. Nobody grinned. We couldn't be seen. I sat there as well. Beside me, my daughter was gazing at the words on the card as though they were etched in my flesh. Technician who is widowed. Technicians. Youngster. I was already starting to get emotional before the ceremony had even begun. I was unaware, however, that this humiliation was only the quiet before the storm. There were glistening dresses and fitted tuxedos everywhere throughout the ballroom. Like bells, laughter rang forth. Every step Kimberly made as she glided through the throng in her beautiful gown caused the camera flashes to shine and the champagne to glimmer in crystal glasses. I saw her from a distance. She had a perfect appearance. Every hair is in its proper position. Every motion was practiced. Every grin was deliberate. She avoided eye contact. Nora went unnoticed by her. Not even a look. She looks like a queen, Nora murmured as she leaned closer to me while still clutching her tiny ribbon purse. I forced a grin as I nodded. She does indeed. Then Eleanor appeared tall and icy, her ash-gray dress gleaming in the chandelier. Like a judge's chain of command, her pearl necklace was a perfect fit around her neck. With the same look she likely used when she handed out life sentences in court, she walked up to our table. Heavy with dominance and emotionless. "Oh, Victoria," she replied, smirking polishedly. "You succeeded." Then she looked across to Nora. "Zoe must be here, or was it Nola?" Nora corrected her in a low voice. "Nora is here." Eleanor grinned without regret. "How charming. I hope there was not too much confusion about the seating arrangements. The logistics of these events might be difficult." Then she fell asleep. No embrace, no warmth, not even an appropriate greeting. Only poison. Wearing pearls as clothing. Nora remained silent. She only gazed down at her home, fidgeting as her cardigan was now bent at the corners from her fingers. Squeezing her hand, I reached under the table. It was shaking. Then the light darkened and the music faded with the clink of a spoon against a glass. The stage caught everyone's attention. Eleanor held the microphone like it belonged in a courtroom as she stood up at the podium. Her tone was well composed as she spoke. "Thank you for coming today, ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the marriage of my intelligent daughter, Kimberly, and her handsome fiancé, Brandon." Across the hall came a volley of courteous applause. She went on to say that weddings are a celebration of family togetherness and heritage. Seeing individuals from all walks of life making the effort to come is quite lovely. Subsequently, her gaze clearly shifted towards me. People from less complicated backgrounds should be glad to be a part of something bigger, even if they just make tiny contributions like working in kitchens or labs. A few muffled giggles followed by more boisterous ones. The room had suddenly burst out laughing at me. At me, not with me. My face was burning, my ears throbbed with my heartbeat. I remained still, clutching the napkins in my lap until they almost tore. Nora's eyes were wide as she gazed up at me, but not out of fear. Fury. Something inside her had suddenly exploded, though I was unaware of it at the time. And then she would do something that would make the room as quiet as a church thunderclap. I heard a chair scrape against the marble floor before I could even catch my breath. Nora got to her feet. 12 years old, it's little yet it's blazing with something strong. Something that for no apparent reason caused mature men to recline in their seats. She started to pass the velvet-wrapped walls of quiet, the stairs, and the tables. I went into a panic. I got up halfway from my chair. I said, "Nora," but she persisted. She continued heading directly toward Eleanor, who was standing there with the microphone in her hand and a look of bewilderment on her face. "Oh dear," Eleanor spoke in a smooth, patronizing tone. "This is for adults only." Nora did not flinch. She merely grabbed the microphone out of her hand. Quiet. Even a string quartet was afraid to perform. Not one fork shifted. The voice of Nora echoed, unambiguous, "Be calm." 12 years old, and there were more women than men in the room. "Stop laughing, please," she urged. "Your servant is not my mother. The strongest person I've ever met is her. She supports others in need, gets up early, and yet finds time to assist me with my schoolwork. She is braver than any of you, even if she doesn't wear elegant gowns." A few people let out a gasp. Others cast shameful glances down. Nora wasn't finished, though. She took something little silver and ancient out of her cardigan's tiny pocket, a portable audio recorder. Andrew had owned it once. When Nora couldn't sleep, he would record thoughts, lullabies, or guitar riffs. She grasped it as though it were composed of fire. She told me to drop off a letter that my mother had forgotten to send when I arrived here 2 days ago. I heard something, but no one noticed. Then she hit the play button. The hall echoed with Kimberly's voice. She will be known as the Widow Tech. Perhaps it will remind her of her place. There were gasps. Cameras lowered, heads turned. Eleanor's voice came next. "This wedding will have been worth every penny if she leaves feeling ashamed." A third voicemail arrived just when the room was at its breaking point. "Chilly. Known. Brandon. If I discover that child is not mine, I promise we're done, Kimberly." Dead quiet sank into the room. "That's Brandon, and there's more," Nora whispered quietly, looking up from the microphone. Just as she was about to hit play again, Kimberly smashed her mask and snapped. With her bridal gown billowing like smoke behind her, she hurried to the stage, her shoes clicking like thunder. She then took Nora by the hair and punched her in the face in front of all the guests. The room gasped when Kimberly's fist struck Nora's face. Like a collective scream imprisoned in a golden ballroom, but not in a courteous or gentle manner. I didn't consider it. I didn't think twice. Like war drums, I clicked my heels as I sprinted across the floor. Nora had stumbled back. Her ribbons slipped from her hair as her small figure curled her palms around her cheek. Kimberly loomed over her like a deranged queen with a crazy face, heaving eyes, and a twisted knot of wrath mixed with remorse. In a matter of seconds, I arrived at the stage and smacked her silently. At one point, the sound was clear and sharp, final. Then I repeated the action, twice. Her veil tilted like a crown dropped from a phony as her head swung to the side. The crowd fell into a startled silence. Glasses of champagne shook in the air. After the band had ceased their performance, I murmured in a quiet voice that was filled with centuries of rage. When someone dares to hurt their kid mother's carry, you have no right to touch my daughter. Why did you have the right? Because you grin for photos and are silk. Because you consider brutality to be grace and humiliation to be fashion. I said, "I've got you, baby," as I knelt down and held Nora. "You won't ever be harmed again." Her eyes were crimson but dry, as if she was too shocked to cry, and Nora was trembling. One of her hair strands still had the ribbons attached. When I looked up again, Kimberly was clutching her face in amazement rather than agony because someone had finally dared to strike back, followed by a hushed male voice behind us. "Is it accurate?" We pivoted. Brandon was wearing his tuxedo, but his face had lost its color. "Kimberly," he said, his voice shaking. "Is it accurate?" Her mouth opened shut, then opened again, but there was no sound. Brandon faced me. "I really apologize, Victoria. I did nothing despite seeing everything." He then carefully removed the ring off his finger. He put it on the edge of a stage, turned around and left when the ceremony was done. His parents came after him. Phones down, guests whispered. I began with the woman Kimberly and Eleanor. They made an effort to embarrass. She is now holding her daughter and standing tall. The night had not ended yet, but their strength. Yes, it was. Kimberly remained still. The fall of her ideal little kingdom, not the smack, caused her cheeks to flush scarlet. She had her fists clenched, like a drowning woman trying to get breath. Her mouth opened and closed again. However, nobody grabbed her. Nobody stepped forward to assist. Nobody stood up for her. The visitors had become watchers rather than enthusiasts, a hall filled with judgmental glances and costly quiet. Eleanor finally said anything. Her heels clicked as if she were passing judgment as she moved toward her daughter. She spoke in a low, knife-like voice. "You are a complete idiot," she growled. "How could you have allowed this to occur?" Kimberly broke her tone. "You instructed me to follow through. Brandon wouldn't ever know you claimed. That all would be resolved." Eleanor's gaze widened. "Everything was damaged by you. You were given one job by us. Don't alter the image." The audience forgot, and they had forgotten. And the visitors forgot. The glistening delusion that now surrounded them in ruin. And then Brandon returned like a scene in a movie. Kimberly wasn't the reason he came. Calmly, he approached the microphone. With a voice full of quiet control, he took it in his palm, made a tiny adjustment, and turned to the room. "For those who are still unsure, the recording is authentic." Kimberly told a falsehood. She acknowledged that the kid is mine, and I appreciate that. I discovered it sooner rather than later. "I want to express one more thing, though." He turned and gave me a sharp look. "From Victoria to Victoria, I apologize. You received brutal treatment, made fun of, embarrassed, and I allowed it to happen as I stood there. I ought to have spoken out. I ought to have put an end to it. I'm responsible for it." With a little gesture of respect, he moved aside and left for the final time. No cheers, no music, nothing but quiet, full of judgment and thickly laden, now directed at Kimberly and Eleanor. Nora moved next to me. She was still a little shaky, but she was no longer scared. And me, I was not embarrassed as I stood there. Not little, but like a lady who had regained her voice at last. Those who had previously ignored us now watched us return to our table with fresh eyes. As we returned to our table, we showed respect. There was no longer a buzz of laughing in the room. There was only the faint sound of shoes moving uncomfortably and eyes that would not contact mine, no clinking glasses, no enthusiastic murmurs. The truth had been revealed, and the truth is unavoidable, particularly when a youngster who has just been struck in front of them shouts it. I leaned over Nora and brushed her matted hair away from her face. "Are you all okay, my love?" Slowly. She nodded. "I had no intention of spoiling the wedding. All I wanted was for them to stop hurting you." Something broke inside of me at that point. From pride, not from hurt or rage, I encircled her in my arms. "Nora, you didn't damage anything. We were saved by you. You reminded them of our identity." A woman from one of the front tables approached us as we were getting up to go. Someone I had never even met. Gently reached out and touched my arm. Leaning forward, she murmured, "Well done." I smiled slightly appreciatively and carried on walking. People threw parties as a way to honor me rather than to avoid me. Eleanor was still like a shattered statue as we passed her. Her jaw was clenched. She remained silent despite her shaking hands. In front of her high-end heels, Kimberly sat slouched in a chair, her eyes glassy and wrinkled. I didn't stop, though. I refrained from boasting. Since they were no longer important, I didn't even turn around. The fact that I was holding my daughter's hand and that we were heading out into the night with our heads held high was what mattered. The chilly wind seemed like a welcome burst of freedom as it touched our skin. There was already a cab waiting close to the curb. Nora slipped in quietly as I opened the door for her. I continued to grasp her hand as I sat next to her. On the way home, we didn't speak. We didn't have to. That evening, when I put her to bed, she mumbled, "Mom, are you upset with me?" as she gazed up at me with weary eyes. I gave her a forehead kiss. "No, sweetheart. You have my admiration. No one will ever again make us feel inferior because of your bravery." I slept soundly that night for the first time in years. However, I was unaware that the entire globe had been observing, and everything would be different by dawn. Sunlight poured into the kitchen as it had never ventured before the next morning. The universe itself seemed to be saying, "Well done," as everything felt softer and warmer. My phone rang when I was stirring Nora's porridge. Unknown figure. I paused, thinking it may be a reporter or someone from the wedding rumors. However, I recognized the voice when I picked it up. "Dr. Patel here, Victoria." My heart hesitated. The clinic where I worked was run by Dr. Patel. No-nonsense brilliant, and rarely contacted unless there was a significant problem. "I've heard you had a busy weekend." Her tone was inscrutable as she spoke. "Half of the wedding attendees. Here are our regulars. Word gets around quickly." She went on. "I brace myself. They're all talking about you, mentioning how you had your head held high, how your daughter courageously spoke out, how no one dared to speak, and how you didn't need them." I was at a loss for words. I tightened my grip on the phone and blinked. I sat down as she stated those words. The creation of a new lead role, someone to oversee test operations and guide younger technicians, has been on our agenda. Someone who can lead with integrity as well as talent. And I believe you are that person. I went cold. "Is the job being offered to me?" She said, "I'm telling you, you deserve it." My eyes welled up with tears. It was more than a job. For the first time in years, someone took a look at me and recognized my value. Naturally, I agreed. I also signed up for an online public health program that same week, something I had only ever thought about when doing laundry late at night. Nora too, and she changed. She grinned more and stepped higher. For her bravery, she even received a leadership award at school. She launched Girls Who Speak Up, a blog. I discovered her cuddled up on the couch one evening, typing intently. "What are you working on?" I inquired. "A post about how adults sometimes forget to do the right thing," she stated. "Children must therefore remind them." Despite the knot in my throat, I laughed. "It's an excellent one." She also grinned. "Mom, it's not only good, it's accurate." The mail came on a peaceful Thursday afternoon. My name was written in a crisp, nearly surgical script, and it was cream-colored and hefty. I could tell who it was from without even opening it. Eleanor. Her penmanship even gave the appearance of having been in a courtroom. Exactly. Chilly and tidy. After years of silence, I stood in the kitchen and stared at it. A wedding follows? Next to smack, a letter now. Nora glanced at her dish of cereal. "You intend to open it?" I let out a sigh. Later that night, I eventually did, and I wasn't shocked. I didn't need anything, and it was all I had anticipated. Victoria. "I was mistaken about you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. However, I hope that eventually you will see that my motives were never malevolent. All I wanted was for my kid to have the finest life. I guess I measured yours incorrectly, Eleanor Grayson." There was no apology. Not really. Justification cloaked in politeness. After carefully folding it, putting it back in the envelope, and letting it sit on the counter for 2 days, I scribbled one phrase back. "I will never forget the past, but I can let it go." Victoria and I sent it by mail. No lengthy discourse and no door closure that leaves the wound exposed. Kimberly never made contact. She had relocated to the East Coast according to a friend of a friend. Nobody knew if she continued to grin for her filtered images or whether she retained the baby. Since I didn't care, I didn't inquire. I had changed my own destiny despite their attempts to remove me. And I came to a really liberating realization during that process. You shouldn't forgive everyone who has her blood. After a few weeks, an odd thing started to happen. Individuals who had previously ignored me in supermarkets or avoided eye contact at the clinic began to treat me differently. Warmer, but not in spectacular ways. Actual. My neighbor used to offer to mow our grass and nod in silence. I was given coffee one morning with my name spelled correctly by a nurse at work who had hardly talked to me more than 5 words. Even a man in the checkout line whispered gently as he looked up from his basket, "Well done." In addition to the wedding, word had traveled about the girl who ventured to speak and the mother who refused a break. However, the outside world was not the most important thing. I had reconstructed it within my own walls. Nora stopped standing near the mailbox. She stopped inquiring as to why her dad's relatives hadn't contacted. She had given up clinging to a version of people who never existed, so she no longer looked through her old photo albums. Rather, she clung to herself and to me. She was sitting across from me at the kitchen table one Saturday morning making sketches for her blog. She added, "I think I want to interview women who have taken risks and taken the initiative. Avoid unpleasant circumstances and speak the truth even if it was frightening." As I sipped my coffee, I grinned. "It sounds strong." She smirked and cocked her head. "I would want to interview you first." I furrowed my brow. "Me, I don't believe I qualify. You confronted a group of wealthy strangers. You started over and rebuilt our lives. At the clinic, you are the team leader. You still remember to add marshmallows to my hot chocolate, do you?" "Indeed, ma'am. You are a person." And in that little instant, I came to a realization. We were no longer surviving. Our news report was founded by us. It is written by truth, love, bravery, and nothing else, not by fortune, fame, or power. Kimberly or Eleanor might reverse that at any time. It used to be a hefty Sunday. They were quiet. Andrew's instrument was still there, resting in the corner. Afraid to laugh aloud, Nora would slink about the living room. Cooking was something I had to do. I didn't want to. Now, however, we had Sundays. We always topped our pancakes with strawberries and made them thick and fluffy. We danced in the kitchen to old tunes that Andrew used to play while wearing mismatched socks. We also took lengthy walks in the park every Saturday, carrying thermoses of chocolate and making up stories as we went. The place was not a mansion. It was real, but it wasn't high society. Above all, there was a sense of calm at work. I flourished in my new position because I was respected, seen and heard, not because I had a corner office that I didn't. In honor of Andrew, I started supervising younger technicians, giving community health lectures, and even planning a blood drive. I also studied at night. Public health. For me, it was more than simply a degree. It was a mission. In order to educate low-income families about basic care, nutrition, and health, I decided to start a program. Because I understood what it was like to be alone. For someone else, I might now be that person. Nora snuggled next to me on the couch beneath our favorite blue blanket one evening after I finished my schoolwork. Her eyes gleamed in the gentle lamplight as she raised her head. "Would Daddy be pleased with us, in your opinion?" My throat constricted. I gave her a glance. My intelligent, courageous child who had dared to stand in front of the world when I couldn't. And I said, "I believe he smiles every day." And I meant it, since we weren't waiting to be loved for the first time in a long time. It was where we lived. On our own terms, just the two of us. Selecting quiet has a peculiarly fulfilling quality. You no longer owe anyone an explanation, not because you're scared. I had been at peace for months when I got a call. Unknown figure. I let it to ring. Then Kimberly sent an email. It wasn't long. "Be cautious." Filled with the sort of shame that only shows up when people's reputations are at jeopardy. When hearts are really crushed, no. I was mistaken, Victoria. I let pride to rule me. My niece is missed. I want to get back in touch. Perhaps have a conversation. I gazed at the display, not out of rage, not in agony, just some clarification. I would have doubted myself years ago, made an effort to maintain harmony. Swallowed my uneasiness. However, it is no longer the case. I didn't have to respond, so I didn't. Eleanor wrote me another handwritten message later that week, a thinly veiled request to mend past wounds which I threw in the shredder. It's not always possible to reopen the door of forgiveness. Sometimes you have to replace the lock. When Nora saw the note in the garbage, she wondered whether it was from her. I gave a nod. She desired to speak. Nora didn't inquire about my words. Good, she said with a simple smile. She is not necessary for us. She was also correct. Our community grew, we made new friends, our coworkers appreciated us, and our neighbors were there when it counted. We had ourselves and each other. No space remained for ghosts, and there was our true freedom beyond everything else. It's pretty weird. To make others feel tall, you diminish yourself for years. You attempt to blend in where you were never accepted. While your spirit slowly burns, you maintain tranquility. However, you eventually cease. You get up, not with rage, with truth, not with noise. And Nora and I did just that. We gave up acting. We ceased our explanation. In the center of a room intended to make us look foolish, we stood up. And we were honest from the start. It did more than simply free us. The system that attempted to destroy us was broken. Nora is doing well now. Girls who speak up. Her blog is becoming more popular. She is honest not because she is noisy. She writes about courage, kindness, fairness, and strength. She also writes as though she understands the meaning of each word. For my part, I've evolved beyond being a widow. I am a mother, a leader, and a woman who took the ashes they left behind and created something strong. Even though Andrew used to smuggle in sugar when he thought I wasn't looking, I'm still working, studying, and drinking coffee. I know Dad would be proud of Nora, so even though I still mourn him, I no longer cry when I think about him. Of myself, we recreated the peaceful empire with love, honesty, and fire. And whatever it is that is listening, let me tell you something. I wish I had heard that at the time. To stand tall, you don't need an invitation. It doesn't matter if they approve of you. And you never ever have to be quiet in order to maintain harmony. Not only did we escape their brutality, it was outlived by us. We outgrown it. And we're not going to shrink again. This is only the start. Remember to like the video if you enjoy the narrative. For more impactful tales, subscribe and leave a comment. Your assistance is crucial. See you at the following one.